Hey guys, welcome back to Business and Professional. This is the second half of your quiz. We're going over chapter 2, and I wanted to break these up in case you want to watch them separately, and you can go back and reference the chapter separate from one another. So in chapter 1, we talked about the basics of communication and the basics of leadership within business and professional. So what we're going to talk about in chapter 2 is how our own self-awareness of how we communicate can affect directly the way we communicate with other people. So how we approach different things as leaders or as workers affects our interaction with other people we work with. So this chapter really hones in on leadership, okay, and different types of leadership. And all of you will have some references in your brain of leadership styles in the past that you've worked with, or good, effective people that have supervised you, or terrible, ineffective. And so these leadership styles are not necessarily meant to ascribe a type of value because they're all appropriate in different settings. It's just that some people do them well and some people do them unwell, or effective and ineffective. And so to me, there's good and bad with every type of leadership style and trait approach, and they all belong in a certain environment, a certain place. And so think about the industry that you want to go into and how some of these may apply or how they might be effective within the work that you're doing. Or maybe you've already started working in the industry you want to work in, and you can have seen some of these models for you. And so you have been able to see how this can affect your industry already. So keep in mind, I always want you guys to keep in mind in the back of your head what industry you want to go into and how this can apply to you. So a little bit of what we call ethnocentrism. I don't have a problem with you bringing your personal experience into this course and also using this as a reference to your future work. That's what I want y'all to do. I want y'all to think about how does this apply or how is it going to apply in the future. So the thing about, we talked about communication in the workplace, okay? We talked about how it is a really vital piece of every effective employee, and it's a really vital part of leadership. So communication in our workplace is vital. Good and effective communication, not just a lot of communication, good communication. And good communication in leadership is vital. It's important. You have to have it to move the needle on things in order to be an effective leader. So there are many ways that you can approach leadership. And so the book talks about a couple of different examples. I kind of deviate from them and try to apply a couple that I think are a little bit more in the vein of what I understand or things that might apply to you. So trait leaders are people that, when you think about them, they're just people that are born natural leaders. So they have that ability to, they're the kid in elementary school who gets picked to be a team captain for things because people follow them, and maybe they're bossy and that's why people follow them, or maybe they are actually good leaders. Sometimes these are people that are just control freaks, and other times they're people who are really good at leading people in different directions. But either way, a trait leader is somebody who's just a born leader. It's somebody who wants to be in that position, who likes being in charge, and who it's something that comes naturally to them. What the incentive or the initiative is can be different from person to person, but a trait leader is someone who has it as one of their character personality traits. So a functional approach, so that was one type of approach, was a trait approach. A functional approach, that is somebody who, so you've got, underneath that, you've got the task approach, and then you've also got, sorry, let me get this, I don't want to mess this up for you guys. Task approach is a manager, and then you have the function person underneath that. So that would be like HR. Okay, so task is the person who keeps people in line with what they're supposed to be doing. that would be a supervisor or manager. And then a function person would be an HR person and company model. And sometimes those things work together, but you need both of them to have a good leadership model. We'll discuss a little bit more about the functional approach in some of our later chapters because they're vital. They are vital also to a company, but they are different from people who keep things on task. So they are there to advocate and to allow employees to have an effective work experience. And then ideally they work together, right? Those two roles will work together and they're both functional and they're both needed in a company. So you need somebody who's a task manager who keeps things going along the way. And then you also need someone who is also a process person, a function person who makes sure that as you're moving things along, people aren't getting burnt out. They're not working too many hours. They're not having all these ethical breaches trying to get their work done. That's allowing their work experience to be less effective. So they work together, and they also work in synchrony to make your experience better from your company, if that makes any sense. So there's the style approach. So the style approach is how somebody communicates or talks, or their way of their interacting with your employees. So there's your typical authoritarian, and that is my way or the highway, whatever I say goes. Really typical of micromanagers. If you guys have ever worked for a micromanager, sometimes it can be really great and other times not. I think micromanagers are great when you're working in something that is, you're new at it. There's a lot of content, or it's a very litigious process. You need to be micromanaged. I worked at Lockheed Martin, and my managers they micromanaged pretty heavily when I got started. And then they started to come off of that a little bit once we got familiar with our job. And so there are instances where an authoritarian micromanaging process can be effective if you know what you're doing in your job. It can be annoying at times. Or if you are a self-paced worker, it can be annoying. So that's why people also adapt to what's called democratic. And so that means that you as an employee kind of have a say in certain things, and there's give and take, and it works together kind of symbiotically. And that means you can talk to your employee and say, I don't need assistance with this. I need help with this, jump in on, and when I'm working on this, but I need you to kind of off my back, leaving me alone with this. And so a democratic probably would be the most middle of the road and the healthiest, where you have a good mix and a good balance, where your boss is there when you need them to be there, but they stay out of your business when you don't need them. So that would be the most middle of the road. And a laissez-faire, I don't know if you guys remember that from, I believe it was revolutionary, the French Revolution, and it's a governmental concept that means hands off. So laissez-faire is kind of a manager or a leader who just allows people to do what they want or pace their own hours. There's a lot of sales jobs, and there's a lot of jobs that you guys will get to encounter as an adult where they won't necessarily be babysitting your hours. They won't necessarily be telling you need to clock in at 8 and you need to leave at 5, and let them know when you have a doctor's appointment, and where were you at 11 o'clock? Let them know when you have a meeting with somebody. There's plenty of managers, and there's plenty of jobs that you can have that you will not be supervised as heavily as some other ones. Hopefully the further along you get in your job, the more freedom you'll have. Now, if you take on a really like a government job, there's a lot of supervision that they're going to micromanage you, because that's just how it is. But there are some companies where they take on a laissez-faire approach to management. And so it just depends on what you're comfortable with. Some people flourish in both of them. I like structure, so laissez-faire is fine, but I kind of like a little bit of structure. So I can do fine in a laissez-faire approach, but I like structure, and I like not being told what to do, but I like kind of knowing what my day is going to look like when I come in. So, and having some order within that. So it just depends on different personality types work better with different that type of style approach. So a situational approach is somebody that traditionally will become kind of an emergent leader. That can happen if a new product gets launched or a new, the example that the book uses is Rudy Giuliani. This will tell you how old this textbook is, okay? Rudy Giuliani for 9/11. So we definitely know a different Rudy Giuliani now. And some of you, I shudder to think some of you weren't even alive on 9/11. And I was in college. So my freshman year. I was as old as some of y'all are now when 9/11 happened. So take that for what it's worth. But Rudy Giuliani was the mayor of New York City during that time, and he had to really step up and handle a situation that was completely out of context, and he had to step up and be a leader in a lot of different ways because of everything that affected the city of New York for 9/11. And so that is a situational approach, and it's kind of that the Shakespeare quote, be not afraid of greatness, for some are born great, some become great, and some have greatness thrusted upon them. And so that is a greatness is thrusted upon you, expectations are thrown on you. It is not necessarily something you can be prepared for. It's very much a lot of things that have happened in with workplaces in the last year. A lot of companies have had to adapt to situational approach. I'm sure you can think of whatever industry you work in or any industry around you that you know people in. Whether I worked in the music industry at the beginning of last year until March, so a lot of situational issues there, and the industry completely changed. We went to virtual shows, and I also did contract work for a restaurant, so had to change the entire business model of a restaurant to make it into a grocery pickup and curbside. So situational approach has been vital for this last year for businesses. Business models have completely changed, and people have had to absolutely just muck it up and figure it out and try new things and figure out what works. And so you may think it may not be something that's necessary, but at some point in everyone's career and everyone's position as a leader, you're going to have to kind of pull yourself up from your bootstraps and figure things out. And the other thing I want you to know is there's textbooks and there's steps and best practices for that type of thing. But when you get to a point in your career where something like that gets thrusted upon you, it's all a guessing game, and you have to go with what makes the best decision at that time. And so if adults have at some point, or people who are further along in their career have at some point told you they knew what they were doing in the face of a communication or work crisis, they probably didn't. You're probably winging it. And until you've been through one of those situations 10, 15, 20 times and looked at every potential facet of how something could go wrong and how you could handle it, it's a lot of guesswork. So if you get to that place in your career or as a leader, don't become despondent. A lot of guesswork in leadership. I hate to tell you, but there's a lot of people out here just making a guess. That's a lot of being out in the workplace. Okay. Don't let anyone else tell you. Otherwise, we kind of know what's going on, but we make a lot of best practices, best guess on that. So the last type of trait they talk about, or leadership approach they talk about, is a transformational leadership. So that's somebody that kind of shifts the industry they're in. I think of Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos with what he's done with Amazon Prime, how that's completely changed manufacturing and getting groceries, how it's changed getting things at your door. It's changed brick and mortar stores just from the business model that he has established with Amazon and the relationships he has created with retailers and with delivery services. It's totally changed the way that we shop and the way that we view how quick we're supposed to get things. You know, now we think, back in the day, we used to think 3 to 5 day shipping was pretty good. And now if I can't get office supplies in 24 hours, I'm kind of a little bit turned out by it. So Jeff Bezos was able to completely create a change that created new chapters in his company, his organization, and also the industry that he works in. So I also think of, if you guys have ever seen The Aviator with Leonardo DiCaprio, Howard Hughes completely changed commercial flying. flying was not something that people ever thought they would get to do. Now it's nothing. Even right now, especially, you can get flights for $98, but it is Howard Hughes was independently pretty much led the charge on changing aeronautics, the way we see commercial aeronautics. It was not that, back in the 30s or even the 40s. By the 50s, people were flying and it was a normal part of their life, and that's all because of what Howard Hughes did. And just forgot the name of his airline. It wasn't United. Forgive me for that. It wasn't Continental. Never mind. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's not relevant. He changed aeronautics for all of us. So those are the different types of leadership approaches. And that's how we individually approach different realms of leadership, how we're wired. And it all comes from different things that are innately within us. So whether it's that we're born leaders, whether it's that we're put in a certain position and we're supposed to function within that, or whether it's that we get it thrown at us. So again, some are born great leaders, like Shakespeare said, some become great leaders, and some have great leadership thrusted upon them. So obviously I twisted the word around it, but that's a way to think of it, is leadership can come to you in 3 different ways. You're born that way, you learn about it, or you get thrown into the mix. So everybody comes into it in some different way. So outside of leadership, power gets bestowed onto us in different ways. Okay, so there are 5 different types of power that we receive as in a leadership model. So there's legitimate power. Hear me out on this, because I know some of y'all politically fall in different ways. But in an election, power it is legitimate. Okay, so that typically an election, something with an election, like our country has, or even let's say if it's a board member. I think I don't want to conflict with one of the other definitions here, but I would say let's go with presidential, and I know it's going to be dicey for some of y'all. Traditionally, what we know of, I'm not here to offend or begin a huge discussion over how you feel about the last election. All I'm saying is traditionally what we view our American election of is a source of legitimate power. So it is people who are elected and appointed to lead. So his power, our government's power, is legitimate, but their leadership approach, what we just discussed, could be all over the board, right? So for instance, we have presidents who have all different types of approaches to how they lead. But they are given that power, they are given that office through a legitimate process, through an election. So obviously someone like LBJ versus George W. Bush or versus Clinton, they all have different leadership approaches, but they're all given their power through the same process. So a referent is a different type of power. So that is kind of a popularity contest, right? It's because they're likable. It's because people have positions of fluency. So they may be put on a board, or they may be put in a organization, or they may be used in a community event because of something they have that it gives reference to something that they have is valuable, right? So I kept thinking homecoming queen, but I think for the purpose of work, it's usually a board member. Board members usually have a lot of connections and they have deep pockets. And so they get a referent power. So they bring that power and it's used and utilized in the organization. An expert is expert power is someone who gets their position because they have experience in something. So I have a decade in communications. I've taught for 6 years through Texas Tech and through Tarrant County College, and I've done a lot of graduate level research, undergraduate level research, different forms of communication theory. I get this job because I have a certain amount of expertise. So that would be people that become an authority on something, or they are given a position within academia or in different positions you can think of within your industry, that this person is kind of the foremost expert on something. And we see that in a lot of different industries. I'm trying to think of something besides government and just basic business, so I won't bore y'all too much. But we do see people who spend their life's work really studying something and getting to know it and understanding it, and they are given positions and titles because of their work, because they are the most expertise in that area. And so expert power is given because somebody has spent the most amount of time and understands their field better or very well. And so they're given a role so that their expertise can be relied on, and they can use that to benefit a certain organization. So a reward power is that comes with someone has the ability to bestow gifts or to give something to an organization. So again, this is where I was a little bit leery on a board member, because you could be referent power as a board member, but you could also have reward power because you have connections with certain people who can bring money into the company or who could incentivize people. And there's a lot of businesses that merger and make relationships because there's reward power, and there's things that come with certain mergers and certain relationships. And so certain people possess reward power just because of their natural connections, or they have certain leverage that they can bring to an organization, and that's what they offer a certain business relationship, or they offer certain type of money, or whatever it is that gives incentive to the organization to bring that person and give that person a legitimate source of power. And the last is coercive. So that's somebody who comes in and they have power within the organization simply from the fact that they can punish people, and they get that power because they through nefarious different ways. It's not a positive thing necessarily to have coercive power. Coercive power means that you have some sort of manipulation or coercion. Can be two different types of the spectrum in terms of persuasion, but you have some sort of persuasive hold over people within the organization. And it could be someone who could blackmail the company because they know something that has happened within it. It could be people who could hire or fire you. And so it's just someone who has the ability to punish people, right? So there are people who use coercive power in bad ways. There's also people who don't abuse coercive power. So that needs to be noted. Not everybody that has that type of organizational power manipulates and uses it to persuade people or blackmail people. An HR person could have coercive power. They have all the dirt on everyone, so they keep your files, they keep, your shady Snapchats that you accidentally sent on to the work snap, or the text message you accidentally sent to your boss. So that person has the capacity to use their coercive power in a bad way, but because of traditionally their ethics are higher than using it to manipulate or to persuade someone to do something unethical, if that makes sense. So that's really it. That's it. I know I went through that pretty quickly, but those are all the different types of power and leadership approaches. The next thing I'm going to do for you guys is your extra credit. So we're going to discuss your extra credit. You're going to need this for your extra credit. So be thinking of someone from your work experience whose leadership style you want to talk about, whether it's someone you emulate or somebody you don't want to emulate. But I want to know what their approach was and what type of power they were given. So if you need to go back and review the PowerPoint that's before this, you can do so, but you can also use kind of the discussion I did with this. So I'll put a little bit of a note on your discussion board, on your extra credit, so that you remember some of these: situational, transformational, style, functional, etc., versus the power. And so you're not just guessing and going back and rewatching this, but that will be what your extra credit number 1 will be. So I'll have that up tomorrow. And this was a quick lesson. I'm sure you don't mind that, but if you guys have any questions, let me know. Email me, and I hope everything's going well for everyone. I hope that the videos are effective for you guys. They go by pretty quick. I don't like to dilly-dally too much, so I hope you don't mind that use of your time, and I hope that you have a great Tuesday, and I will see you soon. Bye.